Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Well, good evening, everyone. I appreciate you coming out in the pouring rain. Did it pour like on your way? Yeah. I'm Michelle Iannello, and I'm here with Danielle Nash and Allison Lockridge. And we just want to really say thank you very much for having us come and spend some time with you this evening. We're excited to be here. I was saying to Danielle, like, it's really kind of nice to talk to people who care about what I have to say, because my children could care less what I have to say. So this is lovely. We really just want to share with you some things that we see are going on within the college admissions today. And I want to share with you a little bit about what goes on here every day in the high school with our counselors. So I think you all are aware, I've been here since September 6th, so it's just over 4 months. It feels like a lot longer. I've gotten to know the Greenwich community in terms of working here and at the district offices. And I wanted to share some reflections with you, because I think that sometimes when you are living where you live, where your children go to school, you don't recognize the things that we have. So when you think about Greenwich High School, we think about all these wonderful resources. We have the resources. So we have College Kickstart, we have SCORE. We just purchased a new program called School Links, which you'll hear about from your kids over the coming years. We have those resources. What makes us who we are our people. We have 15 counselors here who are so incredibly knowledgeable and care so much about your kids and know your children and know the colleges and know the admissions reps. That is not something to be taken for granted. That is not everywhere. I've been a counselor in education for nearly 30 years. This is my 4th district. It is not like this everywhere. We have so much knowledge among those 15 people, including we have actually 17 people, because with Miss Lockridge as our college and career counselor, she is like the heart of what we do in terms of being able to support our counseling staff and our students all the time. If you were to walk into any of our offices on a daily basis, you would see our counselors interacting with our students, our counselors interacting with college admissions reps, working to make sure that they're helping families through this process. So I really want you guys to understand how fortunate we are to have the wonderful people that work with your children every single day. And I'm super proud of them. So with those relationships, we've been able to build a really strong program. So one of the really cool things we did this year is I was like, okay, you guys, we're going to do some committees. And they're like, yay, I don't want to do committees. But one of the things that I wanted to do again was to showcase some of the things that we did in a little bit more up-to-date frame. So we created a new school profile, which we'll show you on here, but it's really a wonderful resource that helps support not only our students, but it helps the college representatives and the colleges understand more about us without having to flip through 10,000 pages. There's links to things that are special things about Greenwich High School, that if your children have been involved in those things, it makes it much easier for colleges to learn about them and to understand what our programming is. We are unique. We have almost every AP class known to man here, amongst many specialized programs that make us stand out. We stand out. We're one of the best schools in this nation, and we know it, and we love it, right? So we have a lot of really great information in here that when you have time to look at it, and if you look at it from like an outside perspective, it really is pretty impressive. Our kids do well. Our kids do better than most. So when they're looking at different schools and different opportunities, I think that our students shine. So this is just something you'll be able to see. And we do have also like just general college matriculation information. We know between 80 and 85% of our students are going to go to a 4-year college. I'm also pretty passionate, you'll learn, I'm passionate about two-year schools and vocation as well. We have students here that aren't necessarily interested in going on that four-year path. What does that look like? We're trying to support children's definition of success, and that's going to look different depending on who that child is. And yes, we have the knowledge base to help kids get into where they want to get in for four-year schools. We also have the knowledge base to support them in whatever direction they want to go. I'm sure you all have stories of people of, the person who has their own HVAC business that does very well for themselves. Probably part of my passion is I have a child who loves engines and wants to go into diesel technology. When I looked at starting salary, I almost fell off my chair. So it's not, it's like, okay. So it's not about necessarily where you go. It's about helping kids get to where they want to be, right? And supporting them in this journey. And we have all the resources to do that here. So we have a lot of kids who do go to two-year schools, and that will be reflective in there. So we really have close to, we're in the 90 percentile of students who go on to some kind of either four-year or two-year situation. We look at kids all the time who are working really hard, to get to where they want to be. And we're consistently and constantly providing resources for them to get there. And a really cool thing too is, like I've mentioned, that we have students who are shooting for the stars. Maybe I didn't mention that, but they're shooting for the stars, and a lot of them get there. We have the information and the data to support making good choices. Now, shooting for the stars for one kid might look different than another, right? So there's that process and the time that's spent in getting to know your children and understanding and how to get your kids to where they want to be, that is really reflective of what our counselors do all the time. So when we're thinking of the College and Career Center, we have about 2/3 of our class work every year with Miss Lockridge. I don't know how you do that.
I do a lot of workshops, big group things.
Yeah, okay. If you come in here sometime in October and try and get near her office, you won't be able to. She's amazing. I mean, I think Miss Nash will be able to tell you the fall, like it's crazy because we're meeting with your kids. We're helping them through this process. So I really feel like we have a lot to be proud of, and the PTA does an amazing job with supporting our students, supporting our school. The outreach program is amazing. I'm just blown away by it. The support for helping students across all different areas is just incredible, and we're very, very appreciative. So we're not going to really focus that much tonight on necessarily on the college process. We do that, right? We do that with our junior college kickoff. We spend a lot of time with seniors. And really the focus, we're going to talk a little bit more about what's going on since COVID. Things are starting to kind of get back to normal. What kinds of things are we seeing? All right, so we're happy to answer questions after. So I'm going to turn it over. I think it's Miss Nash. That's next.
It is.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so I want to also add, thank you to the PTA. One of the things the PTA supports the school counseling department with is the opportunity to get out and attend professional conferences and get onto college campuses so that we can really be fostering those relationships with the admissions professionals that work at, many of the different colleges. So one of the trends that we wanted to talk about that sort of come out of the pandemic is the boom in test optional, right? For as long as I've been working in college admissions, fairtest.org has been a resource that was available to students. When I first started in admissions, there were literally a dozen or 24 schools listed on fairtest.org. And right now, the vast majority of schools are on there in some capacity or another. The pandemic obviously thrust almost everyone into a test optional world, and the benefits to students and in some respects to colleges has really, made a lot of schools pause to think about the importance and how they use testing in the process. we're still seeing that even right now, between 50 and 65% of students are not submitting their test scores to the colleges that they're applying to. I had an opportunity to visit NYU last spring with about 50 other high school counselors from around the area. And we did a mock application review. So we sat in groups of 10 and we reviewed 5 real applications that they had reviewed in the last admission cycle. And we had, some nice discussion about what NYU might or might not have done and why we thought that, based on sort of some preliminary information that they had shared with us at the start of the workshop. And there were 2 of those 5 applications where the kids looked outstanding. But they said, yep, but those applicants shouldn't have submitted their test scores. And so they were ultimately denied. So we really want to think very critically about who's submitting their test scores and where they're submitting them. On the flip side of that anecdote, we see that students with super high scores are admitting at higher rates than ever when they submit those scores. So it's sort of like a double-edged sword right now. So we really want to make sure that we're guiding the students to make the best decision for them, what their test scores look like, how they reflect on them, and what the schools that they're looking at are. Obviously, any of our underclassmen have recently gotten their PSATs back, right? So we do want students to be poised and in the best position, putting their best foot forward. So I don't want to say testing doesn't matter at all, right? Because otherwise we wouldn't start giving the PSATs to our 9th graders. Students can use Khan Academy. So everybody that took the PSATs this year has a personalized link in Khan Academy, which is a wonderful way for students for free to practice on the areas of the SAT that were their areas of weakness. So this is a great thing that kids can incorporate, maybe not our 9th graders, though it's not a bad thing to take a look at, but definitely our 10th and 11th graders. Incorporate a little bit of that Khan Academy review here and there along the way. I always say to my students, a little bit of test prep along the way has a huge cumulative effect. So that's something that students can really do that's pretty easy and free. I've also seen a huge shift over the course of my 20 years here at Greenwich High School, from the SATs to the ACTs. I did my own mini research project and found that 90% of kids who take both the SAT and the ACT are scoring better on the ACT. So when I'm talking to my students, I really encourage them to give that some thought. We recently got back, we offered a practice ACT here to our juniors. I got back a stack of scores and I was shocked that only 3 of my 47 juniors had taken advantage of that free practice ACT. So I'm a little bit worried that kids think like, oh no, testing's not for me. So I definitely want to encourage students to continue to think about that. Most of the local test prep companies will offer free or very low cost ACT practice tests. So for those juniors that didn't take advantage of what we've got here, that's definitely something else to think about doing. And obviously our juniors will take the SATs here as part of the school day SAT. Definitely students should not be, in my opinion anyway, not registering for the Saturday March SAT, because the time in between the Saturday testing and our school day testing, there's not going to be much growth or change in that little window. So I always say, save yourself the money, wait till May or June. But when we get those SATs back from the school day testing, then the school counseling department can help students really talk about what's a good test prep plan for them. Depending on where their scores are, what their transcripts look like, what their college goals are. There's going to be some students that we guide to do test prep. There's going to be other students that we say your energy and resources would better be spent in other areas. So I hope that's helpful. One other trend that we're seeing is with extracurricular activities, right? So obviously in the 2021 school year, activities here at Greenwich High School looked very different than they had ever looked pre-pandemic. I think we've found that kids are having a little bit of a hard time diving back in and re-engaging with activities the way they did pre-pandemic. So we really want to encourage students to think about what activities they're interested in, what things meet their passion. Karen Foster, our Director of Student Activities, is also very supportive of students who want to start up new clubs and activities, which is obviously a wonderful way to show leadership skills. But even within the clubs and organizations that we have already, we need the kids to join them earlier so that they have an opportunity to grow and develop into those leadership roles in their junior and senior year, as opposed to having a wake-up call in their junior year. Oh no, I haven't joined anything yet. Then there's not a lot of room for leadership. So we really want to encourage parents to help engage your kids in those conversations. We certainly do that. Here, we really do emphasize that. We spent a counselor advisory talking with our 10th graders about the importance of getting involved. And then finally, I just want to talk about a couple of trends we've seen regarding transcripts and the strength of coursework at Greenwich High School in terms of preparation for college. I'm not sure that it's necessarily pandemic related, but it's definitely a sort of a two-way split that we're seeing in terms of the trend. One is kids who feel like I must take as many honors and AP courses as I can. We've seen more kids than ever struggling because they're overcommitting themselves, that they're signing up for AP courses they really have no business being in, or taking too many honors or AP courses and stretching themselves too thin. So we really want to emphasize to students that everybody has the just right balance. I often, if you've watched my course selection video, talk about like a tray, right? If you're trying to put all these things on your tray, you want to be able to balance that tray. You don't want it to be so lopsided that it spills over and everything falls off the tray. The other side of that coin, and this may be a little bit pandemic related, I've seen more kids and more transcripts than ever where kids have straight A's, but hardly any honors and AP classes. I think they are so worried about not getting an A that they're not stretching themselves enough. So again, I really like you don't have to have straight A's. The colleges will look at a straight A transcript where there were hardly any honors and AP courses and say, this student has shied away from the rigor. I'm worried about whether or not they're going to be able to take our demanding courses, whether they're really ready to make that transition. Why is it that they've had straight A's but not challenged themselves? Is there a mental health thing going on there, right? So these are all things that we need to talk with the kids about. So again, that they have that balance, that they are stretching and growing themselves and taking on challenging courses. So those are just the three trends that I wanted to talk about. And I'm going to turn it over to Allison Lockridge.
So as I was writing down my trends, I realized, wow, a lot has changed in 20 years since we started.
Oh, yes.
So we start the same year? Maybe 1 year.
I think 1 year apart.
Before me, yeah. Yep. So I've been working in the college field for 25 years now, but this is my first year going through it as a parent, a junior. We're out there visiting colleges and it's scary. It's fun, but it's scary at the same time. But so I would say probably one of the biggest trends that we've talked about as a department that we're really seeing is application inflation. Students are applying to too many schools. When we started 20 years ago, I would say very typical for a student to apply to say 6 to 8 colleges. And anything beyond 8 was like, whoa, that way too many colleges. We really like to keep that sweet mark between 10 and 15. Anything beyond 15, I personally like 10 to 12, but anything beyond 15 is really unmanageable. And, we probably have this conversation multiple times a day with students about more is not better. A lot of students feel like if I apply to more, I'm increasing my chances. I would definitely argue that that's not the case. I would say the other thing that's really changed is the application process itself has become much more complicated. And so if you're applying to 18 to 20 schools and trying to manage the whole process, it just creates like really unnecessary stress and anxiety. And then you're spread thin, kind of like, getting spread thin with your classes. So, many colleges interview, supplemental essays are critical, very, very important. Although who knows with the AI thing now, so let's talk about that another time. That'll be a topic for next year. Some schools now are allowing students to send optional videos. Many schools require students to complete what's called a self-reported academic record, like entering all their courses in. Some schools require certain things up front in the application, some after they've submitted the application on the portals. That demonstrated interest piece is really important, connecting with admission reps directly, interviewing when you can, but you can't do all of that effectively when you have too many applications to manage. So as long as you really have researched your schools thoroughly and you have a well-balanced list, there really shouldn't be a need to apply to more than 12 schools. Again, it depends on the student, depends on the types of schools they're applying to. But at the end of the day, the student and family, or probably more the family, is paying the application fees and really has the choice to apply to as many schools as they want. As a department, we work really hard to keep that number manageable. We'll have parents come in, we'll, strongly discourage it, but we really need parents to help us at home to really reinforce, keeping that number really manageable. So big application inflation. In addition to the number of schools students are applying to, more students are really crowding that top 100 college marketplace than ever. So despite the shrinking overall market for college applicants, more and more students do feel it's within their rights to apply to schools without testing. So we're seeing, more students applying to those top tier schools because they may not have decided that they could apply before with the testing that they have. Mm-hmm. So there's this big inflation at a very small number of schools when there are, over 3,000 schools out there. And I feel like we are feeling that, especially here at Greenwich High School. Always been an issue here, and I'm sure it is everywhere, that our students apply to the same schools. But we're seeing more of that, I would say, in the past few years. Like last year, this year, we're seeing some really large increases in applications to top state schools like Michigan, UVA, Wisconsin. So Michigan has always been really hard to get into. Now Wisconsin is like creeping up right underneath there. And those, kind of, I don't really like to call them top or tier 2 colleges, but I don't know a better word. So kind of that second, level, but schools like Boston College, NYU, Tufts, Tulane, big increase in applications to those schools. And, we hoped that this year might kind of level off a little bit, but the reality is that those numbers are continuing to increase. So it's more important than ever, not to create anxiety in here today, but it's just more important than ever for students to really apply to a range of schools. I'll talk about my son a lot this year, probably. I do remember you doing that. But one of the best things that I did was I brought him to see a couple schools at the end of his sophomore year, and we went and visited one school in the fall of this year. Schools I was pretty confident he's going to get into. He loved 2 out of the 3 of them. He's super excited about them. So he's got 2 likely schools that he's excited about. Pretty sure he's going to get in. And it just takes that stress out of the process. So now we can visit more competitive schools and, have that balanced list. So, and I talk a lot about in my presentations about really finding those hidden gems. We have a great list on our website of colleges that we put together as a department of, hidden gems that not everybody from Greenwich High School is applying to. So it's okay to have some of those schools that a lot of our students are applying to on your list, but you don't want your whole list to be consumed with those. I'd say another thing that we've really been seeing is, especially over the 5 years, but really increasing is low early action admits. More often than not, students are getting deferred. Does not mean they won't get in, but For those new parents out there, early action is not binding. The deadlines are typically in November, although some as early as October. And decisions come out either December or January. Colleges want to see what else is coming down the pipeline. There's not a whole lot of advantage for colleges to take students early action. So more students are getting deferred, which can create anxiety. And then what happens is then students then get anxious and then add more schools to their list. You know, again, it's not that students won't get in, students are deferred through regular decision, they get more, colleges see more grades, first semester grades, but we are seeing more deferrals. So again, more important than ever to apply to a couple of those like solid likely schools early action. So nice, like getting in somewhere by December if possible. It just, you know, you want to be willing to go to that school. You don't want to be just applying to random safety schools. But having those couple likely schools that you're pretty sure you're going to get into and probably get a lot of merit scholarships at, probably get into an honors program at, and just having peace of mind, because otherwise it's really hard for some students, not all students, but it can be hard to not know anything until like say, you know, March or April of your senior year. I'm sure everybody's heard about this trend that seems to be creeping up is the real increase in students applying early decision. Again, for newcomers here, early decision is binding. It's not like early action. Early action is not a binding agreement, but early decision is. So if you get accepted to that school, that's where you're going and you have to withdraw your other applications. So, you know, certain schools, not all schools have early decision, but certain schools like, you know, Hamilton, Tulane, Northeastern, Boston College, Villanova, definitely schools like Colgate, Bucknell. You know, many of these schools are filling half of their class through early decision 1 or 2. And I think we're seeing it a little bit more probably here than other areas because our families are savvy enough to know that it increases their chances. But it's not for everybody. And as a department, we really, you know, try to educate our families that it certainly can, you know, substantially increase your chances at certain schools. Again, not all schools, but it really is not for everybody. Some students want to compare merit scholarships at multiple schools. You can't do that if you apply ED. Some students are really not in a position to make a decision where they're going to spend the next 4 years of their life when they're in high school. And then that's okay. But you do need to be aware of those big heavy hitters for early decision. So like I said, like a Bucknell, more than half of their class is filled through early decision. So it doesn't leave, you know, it's not that big of a school. It doesn't leave that many spaces left. So what might have been more of a target school through ED might end up being a reach through regular. So I was looking at the stats the other day. So class of 2019, 211 of our students applied early decision. And then last year for class of 2022, 282 applied early decision. We can't release those numbers yet for this year, but it actually seems pretty comparable to last year. It's not a big increase from last year. I would say another trend that, I don't know if it's a trend necessarily, but something we're seeing more of this year is the importance of senior grades. Senior grades have always been important, but we were surprised to hear the number of schools this year that required first quarter grades for early decision schools. That's rarely been the case. Colleges may request them or, you know, students send them if they're good, but many schools for students that applied early decision, they required first quarter grades. Now, semester grades go out to all schools that students apply to. So the other thing that we saw last year, we saw many schools sending letters to seniors with concerns about their semester grades and, you know, basically saying, you know, you need to step up your game. Otherwise, you know, your acceptance is not going to be here anymore. So there's just been a real focus on senior grades, which makes sense with the pandemic and, you know, potential grade inflation of places. We're also seeing, obviously not only here at Greenwich High School, but, just nationwide is a real increase in applications from first gen and low income students, along with international applications. We're also seeing an increase in number of students applying to direct admit programs. Those programs can be like business, engineering, architecture, nursing. More schools are adding direct admit programs, but more students overall are applying to competitive programs like business and engineering. And I feel like that's always been the case here. A lot of our students want business and engineering. And, very often we'll have conversations with students. A lot of times we'll say, what type of business? And they're, I don't know, just.
I'm not sure I understand.
Oh.
I'm not sure I understand either.
I don't either.
I really don't know what type of business. So, what we talk to our students about is that, there are a lot of different paths to business. So it doesn't mean you have to have an undergraduate degree in business. You can major in econ, major in English, you can go get your MBA after. So there are a lot of different paths versus being, applying to the most selective major to all your schools. And schools do it differently. So like Villanova has a College of Business and a College of Engineering, and you have to apply specifically to those schools. And if you don't apply to those schools, it's very hard to transfer, close to impossible to transfer once you're there. Then a school like Colgate, applying to, just the liberal arts school, you're applying to, let's say, an econ major. It doesn't really matter what your major is going to be. But it's important to really be educated about colleges that have selective majors, and engineering is really a big one. I really encourage students to really think about diversifying the major across schools, to not necessarily apply engineering everywhere unless they're like diehard engineers, but maybe a physics major, maybe a math major, and pursuing engineering down the line at some schools. So kind of mixing it up for major. But I do want families to understand, again, I think our families are savvy enough to know this. So what we are seeing is, more students kind of trying to game the system and come up with unique majors that might help them get in. And admissions counselors can read through that in, 2 seconds. So, it's like I said, okay to think about different majors, but you obviously don't want to be, putting down like a philosophy major if you haven't been like a real humanities person in high school. So really making sure that you're thoughtful about the major that you're putting down in applications. And this is something that, we help students with. I would say another trend is increased parental concerns about paying for college. So we used to initiate those conversations a lot, but, we're hearing parents asking us earlier on, that sophomore year, how are we going to pay for this? Which, is healthy to be having those conversations early on, but just given the economy that we're in now, it's important to think about cost and to have those conversations at home, sooner than later. It's definitely a conversation I'm having with my son. If you're like many of us, you're not going to qualify for financial aid, but you might not be willing to spend $75K a year. So what does that look like? And looks like looking at schools that offer merit scholarships, applying to some less selective schools where you're going to get that merit money. But we're definitely seeing more of that. And then just, to recap, obviously the biggest trend is just an overall increase in the selectivity at the most selective colleges. That does not mean all colleges. And so, as Michelle mentioned at the beginning, we have some really great tools. We have College Kickstart. How many juniors are in here? Okay, so definitely, if you haven't heard of College Kickstart, definitely ask your kids at home to share College Kickstart. We sent an email with an invitation to Kickstart. It's a really wonderful program. It has basically the last 2 years of admission stats from Greenwich High School, but it's very advanced in terms of how you look at that data, and students love it. So students can put their list of schools in there. And right now, they're not really sure where they're applying, but it actually gives them a grade on their list. So most lists start off in the D and F range, and then you like tweak them and take schools off, reorder. And, the goal is to get it more in that B range. But it can be really helpful with list development, and it's something that students can use at home. But certainly counselors can work with students in their office and putting their list into Kickstart. But it's nice to just have that tool, when you're at home. But that is only available to juniors. So that rolls out, we have to pay per student. So it rolls out in January of junior year. Last year was the first year that we used Kickstart. And then like Kickstart, we have SCORE. SCORE is how we send all of our documents to colleges. So that's how we send our transcripts and letters of recommendations. So all of the same data that's in Kickstart is also in SCORE. It's just you view it from a different way. So SCORE has scatograms, so you can, see yourself on the scatogram. So it's the same data. I always say use both as tools. And then I should have brought a copy, but we have a college book that we publish in the College and Career Center every year. A lot of families like just a hard copy. It's not online. It's just like a hard copy that we've done forever here. And it's just a visual of the data from the previous year. So obviously the students' names aren't in there, but you can see like Boston College, all the applications, GPA test scores, how they applied, early action, early decision, and then what their decisions are. So that's always in hot demand. We have copies that students can take out here in the media center. I do hear, I don't think it's supposed to be the case, but I do hear it's available at Staples. Yeah, I know it's really wrong, but
Greenwich Library.
and Greenwich Library, yes, we
We
do
keep
actually
saying we
all the
should sell it
libraries.
in the bookstore.
Yeah.
Maybe the
So,
PTA, we said, wants it.
yeah, we always talk about that. We should do it as a fundraiser of some sort rather than have Staples make some money off of it. But using those tools, as data is really helpful, but like Michelle said, they don't replace your counselor. So really, like we're talking to admissions counselors all the time. This is what we do for a living. And so, well, sometimes the data might say it, we might say, well, I'm not so sure about that. So it's really important to use us in addition to the data. So that really summarizes, I would say, some trends that we've been seeing. And we have some time for questions.
Just along what you were saying, Allison, sorry. When you're applying to 20 schools or 24 schools, so do you remember like when we applied to colleges, we would like run to the mailbox to see what was in there every day? And like put your little brother out of the way, get out of the way, you're running to the mailbox. Everything comes electronically now, so it's going to come to your child's email. So like we have very little control over this as parents, and I have 2 older ones. My youngest graduated from high school last year, and I constantly felt like saying like, have you checked your email? Have you checked your email? Have you checked your email? Each of the colleges that your children apply to, the colleges set up a portal. So all of this information gets dumped in there. So sometimes I'm like, okay, well, where's the financial aid package from such and such school? And it's in the portal. Like you're waiting for it to come in the mail, and it doesn't come in the mail. It's in your kid's portal, and my kid's off like playing hockey and doing whatever he's doing and not paying attention. So when you have 20 plus schools and 20 plus portals, it can get very unwieldy. Because you all as parents start to lose that control that I personally like, but you start to lose that, right? So if you have control over this process from the beginning, it becomes much less stressful, like what Allison was saying. The other thing I wanted just to reinforce was sometimes if you're looking at, obviously you want to shoot for the stars, but when you are thinking about the different kind of colleges out there, there are thousands of colleges in this country. And if you apply outside of the range of where we live, if you apply outside the range of possibly where the competitive level of your child can be, so maybe it's just a little bit less competitive than what they might be able to get into. Like what Allison said, they might get more merit-based aid, which is not money you have to pay back. So that's scholarships, right? There's grants. They may have access to honors programs or get into schools within the universities that they would never have gotten into at a more selective school. So when you're thinking about just think about those things, because the best college out there is the best one for your child, right? So we have the resources here with SCORE and College Kickstart and all those things. But using that information to make the best decision with your counselor for your kid, I think that's an advantage that we have here. So we do have some time for questions if anyone has any.
When you mentioned senior grades are more important for each quarter or semester, do you think there's any correlation with scores being less important or relevant?
Would you guys repeat the question?
Yeah, definitely. So is there any correlation with senior grades being more important with applying test optional? I think personally, I think it has more to do with inflation of grades and like the flux of grades from the couple years prior.
Okay.
But
Wondering if
it
there's
certainly
more-
probably has a little something to do with it. I don't know, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think definitely the pandemic, right? Because our current seniors, right, we need to remember that this group of seniors went out in March of their freshman year. Then in 10th grade, here at Greenwich High School, we were lucky, they were hybrid, right? They were in and they were online. In other districts, they were fully virtual or they were in school only every other day and had no virtual piece. So when you think about all of those variables for the kids when they were in 10th grade all across the country, then last year we started to get back to normal, but still not really. I think that's probably part of what's
Yeah.
really lent the colleges to want to see like, okay, this year we're really back to normal. Now, what do those grades look like?
Yes.
So I was just wondering, and you don't have to give like a number, but of the early decisions that in Greenwich High School, percentage wise, how many of them from Greenwich are getting into their early decisions?
So the question is the percentage of students getting in through early decision. I do not have that handy. We could
I mean,
probably get that, though.
anecdotally, I would say probably more of my ED kids this year were happy than not.
Yes, yes.
Without putting an actual percentage on it,
Yeah.
right?
I
Yeah,
think students are making smarter early decision choices. Whereas in past, students used early decision to shoot for the moon. And people are realizing that, like, then it just is gonna make everything else very risky. So they're being more, for the most part, a
Thoughtful.
little more thoughtful about their ED choice. So,
yeah, I would say shooting for the moon doesn't mean that they're getting in.
right,
more.
no,
I
yeah,
think
no, yeah.
that happiness factor, right, of kids who are
Yeah.
getting in, I think is because the kids are using the data, they're working with their counselor and they're like using that ED to leverage themselves into a place that they would be happy going because they
Yeah.
see how much the ED factor can weigh in their favor.
Yeah.
Way in the back there.
Thinking about college, I am. And think, um, which schools do you like? Is it go to the area and then the community city, and the Connecticut? So what should we be doing?
The question is, how do you research? How do you visit schools? How do you know when to do these things?
Priorities
Yeah.
for a 10th grader.
Yeah, I mean, for a 10th grader, I mean, you can go anywhere. I don't think you have to have a plan in place. Like I usually tell people, if you're going away on vacation someplace, visit a college. You don't have to go on a tour, drive through it. If, around here, like there are so many good schools, or colleges right around where we live, go visit them. Sometimes when you might driven by Fairfield University 10,000 times, but have you looked at it from a perspective of your child going there? Have they looked at it? And as they get closer, like summers are great opportunities again, to be able to go visit, so, you're away on again, you're away on vacation. Go drive through someplace, go on a visit. It's never too soon to do that, just to get different ideas. And like what Allison said, sometimes if you're looking at, or, reach out to your counselor and say, this is where my child is academically, where would be a nice place to start. That would be a good fit to start off with. That's not like a shoot for the moon school. So they can get excited about someplace to know where they could go to. It's never too soon. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. Yeah, so when do we get involved? Yeah, that's a great
Right
question.
now, juniors.
So we get involved in December of June, well, we're involved through the ninth grade, but we really start the college process, like the junior college kickoff is in December of junior year. But before that, we have the big college fair in October, which many of you may have attended this year. So counselors will often sit down with their students and recommend schools that they might want to check out at the college fair. But really the kickoff starts in December of junior year. And then after that, families schedule their junior college meeting with their counselor, and it's an hour-long meeting, student, counselor, parents. And that's where you really are developing a list of schools. And after that initial meeting, students and families are welcome to access me in the College and Career Center, attend any of my workshops, which I offer in the spring of junior year and then in the fall of senior year. But, you know, back to your question about as a sophomore parent, I think it's also important to take the lead of your child. You know, again, back to my son. I mean, he seemed like a little baby in the fall of his sophomore year. Like I couldn't even imagine taking him to a college, like he was like nowhere near interested. So I wasn't interested. But then it was like, you know, March of sophomore year and he started asking questions. And so I took him to just a range of schools, a big school, a small school, medium-sized schools, one in the city, one in a rural area. So that was helpful in the spring of sophomore year, just to get a sense. So it's not like this huge foreign thing before going into junior year. So I would say if your child is not resistant, it's great in the spring of sophomore year to just see like a few different types of schools. But the bulk of those visits really happen during junior year.
I also want to just say one other thing to really encourage for the sophomores is reading, reading, and reading. So, you know, when my daughter was a sophomore, I ordered a magazine she was a dancer and I ordered a subscription to Dance Magazine. So something was coming into the house that was of high interest, and just any extra reading we can expose the kids to outside of the school reading. I know some kids are really resistant to that, but that's why I think trying to find things that are high interest for the kids will also just help their vocabulary, their reading stamina. So that's another thing I would say you can do for a sophomore.
Here's some online questions, just two online questions. First, does it hurt for a student to apply undecided? I'm assuming that's referring to the meter.
No, I don't know that so does it hurt to apply undecided? No, I mean, most colleges ask for academic interest areas on the application, not necessarily a major. So in that case, I might not say, a lot of times it's like 3 options. I might not say like undecided, 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 because it makes them seem like they have no interest. So, you know, so if they're strong in English, I might just say interest area would be English. But if they're asking for a specific major, undecided.
There are colleges that require to apply to certain school. though.
Well,
Right,
I was
right,
gonna
yeah.
say too, you know, to Allison's point, right? Like if you're using undecided as a way to get into a school because you want engineering or you want the nursing program, if it's a direct admit program, there may be very limited opportunity. So again, you know, it's really talking to each individual student about what their long-term interests are. If they really are undecided, then there's no reason to not put undecided. But if they're using it as a gaming opportunity, I don't want to see a student shut out of a program because that's what they've used as their major.
But at larger schools like that, undecided means applying to arts and sciences. So rather than that Villanova School of Business, I'm applying to arts and sciences at Villanova. And then some of my academic interest areas might be English, whatever.
And one more online question, and we'll go back to that. How do you suggest communicating to colleges that a student did not have extra time on the ACT, the SAT, ACT, AP, and in class tests and coursework?
We don't. They don't know if the kid had extra time or didn't have extra time. That's not a consideration for colleges. The question was about, to repeat the question, it was, how do you communicate to colleges that you didn't use extra time? But it's not anything that the colleges consider.
Just when we talk about visiting colleges with the students, you talk about going in the summer and that. Would you recommend that if you're going, then better to do it when the students are on campus so that the kids can, you know, So
Yeah.
does that mean then we need to find, like, take them out of school for a day, or like, how does, it's better, I guess, to get them.
When the students are, yeah, so the question is it better to visit campuses when students are in session? You'd be surprised at what a great experience you can have in the summer when students are not on
Yeah.
campus. Ideally, I would say especially like smaller schools, it's nice to see the students that are there. If you're visiting a big state school, you could definitely visit in the summer.
Yeah.
So it is hard to get the visits in throughout the whole school year, and then, colleges end in May.
Yeah.
So, ideally you want to see several throughout the school year, but it's definitely okay to see some in the summer.
I mean, there's advantages to going over the summer when there's not a lot of kids. I think you can get some more personalized attention. Plus, I find that your children will be less embarrassed to be seen with you. Well, that's
Not sure about that.
Because they kind of like walk around like they know you're with me. Like, I don't understand, but sorry, but you're laughing because it's true. But but you do see it a little bit differently without the kids on campus, but I don't think it's horrible either way.
I would also add as a parent of one college graduate, one in college and going to college next year. It is time consuming, so plan ahead, like use February break, maybe use April break, like it's a lot of logistics. So summer is definitely great, but if you're gonna do it, like plan ahead, because it's a big country and it's expensive, and also after the tours sell out, like I laughed, this last year was really hard to get a tour. Everything was like, sold out, whatever.
Yeah.
It's really, really challenging,
Yeah.
So
And along those lines, I would say be strategic about where you're visiting versus like flying all over the country and just seeing like 30 schools.
Yeah, don't do
And there's
that.
so much offered virtually now. I always say before you schedule a visit, a student should have read about the school and the FIS guide, which is one of our recommendations for a handbook. Quick skim of a few pages, attend a virtual information sessions and webinars on the school, but do some research before you decide you're going to visit, so you can visit less schools overall.
I have told a few people, I also have a daughter who's a senior, and we went on what I refer to as the great grand college adventure. And we went over April vacation last year, and we drove from here out to Indiana and back again and saw 8 or 10 schools of all different sizes, shapes, locations. And I said, that was it. That was our great grand college adventure. But from there, you can make a determination of what kinds of schools you want. And then we'll go visit the ones you get accepted in, that you've done all the research on after you've been accepted. So she's very lucky. She has a handful of acceptances. So now we're working on planning trips to accepted student days. But at least now I know when I spend the money to fly out to a place that she's in, and she's lucky to be into some direct admit nursing programs, since we've been talking about, those specialty kinds of programs. So it's a great strategy to utilize.
So unfortunately, no, I'm done with the college process, but there was always this notion that colleges like to see interest. In other words, that you visited, that you've taken a tour, that you have been to campus, that you've been on a virtual. Is that still, are you still seeing that? Or is that less important these days because of virtual?
Depends on
I don't
the
think it's
school.
less, it definitely depends on the school. I don't think it's less important overall, but they can track when you do things virtually. So it's still participating. You register for a virtual event, and that's still showing interest.
And I think it depends where the schools are too, right?
Yeah.
Like if they're far away, right, the colleges understand. So that demonstrated interest is not just being on campus, it's doing the virtual, it's when the reps are here at Greenwich High School that you're going and meeting with them and visiting them. If they're doing a regional reception, that you're going to that reception. They track email. I tell all of my students, if you're looking at a school, get on the mailing list and then open the emails that they send. Because some schools are literally tracking, did the student open the email? If there was a link embedded in the email, did they click on the link that drove the student to the college's website? So schools that are using demonstrated interest are using it in lots of different ways.
And we can help you to determine what those schools are.
I was gonna
because
say
you can't do it
Kickstart.
for everybody.
Right,
Yes, yes.
But Kickstart
Yes,
does
right.
also tell us who's using demonstrated interest. So another reason that I think Kickstart is such a valuable tool is once you've got a working list, or even if your list is ever changing, put those schools into Kickstart and you'll see right away who's using demonstrated interest.
There was a question in the back, yeah.
Hi, so, I have a children, and for one, like, ninth grade, there were all extracurricular activities except sport, critical role, and then tenth grade was kind of, and so what do you recommend for 11th graders who, you know, maybe they've forgotten about how limited we were in the first half of their high school career, but curriculums, the second part of it is, for students that play 2 or 3 sports a year, kind of, but are not like going to be included in Division I school, like, is there extracurricular of, you know, varsity high school sports teams valuable?
Oh, yeah. So the question is for students who maybe were not as involved when you were younger, and how to get them more involved now, and is there value in?
Well, my grade there really was very limited about previous.
No, right, because of, right. So one of the things, again, at Greenwich, there's a ton of things to do here. There's a lot to do. If your child is having a hard time finding something to do, have them meet with their counselor and they can try and direct them, and there's a million things to do. Athletics are always important. You don't have to be the star athlete. You can play intramurals. We have intramurals every day. They're going on all the time. It's consistency in showing that you have the ability to stick with something is also what they're looking for. So I used to see back in the day when you had to have like activity resumes instead of putting things into things electronically, kids saying, well, I'm on, you know, the greenhouse and garden club and the chess club and, you know, all these 10,000 different clubs, but they only went sporadically to things. There was no consistency. There was nothing showing that they were able to, that stick-to-itiveness type of thing to show that they can commit to something and stay with it. So I don't necessarily think you have to be involved in 10,000 things, but you have to show consistency.
And I would just add, you know, we do have a lot of athletes here, and colleges are looking for a sense of commitment. So you don't have much time if you're playing 3 sports. But community service is definitely important. But you don't have to do 100 hours a year. But I would say that to make that a priority and, you know, dabbling, whether it's over breaks or over the summer, but kind of trying to fit in service is a common essay question, a supplemental essay question is to talk about service. And sometimes I'll be meeting with athletes and they haven't done anything except play sports. And then the problem is like, it's hard to talk about other things in those supplemental essay questions. So I would say to service would be my, you know, biggest suggestion to add.
And we have some great community service clubs here at Greenwich High School. So you know,
Yeah.
you can kind of even search, you know, specifically for those. So
Also, I wanted to mention, just came out the other day, that the United Way actually has. the
Yeah, full
resource
list.
page, which is super helpful for kids to find volunteer opportunities, other than what we have here. There's a lot of stuff.
awesome.
Well, on the test option, you mentioned 56% of applying without test. Is that the case for or is that?
Nationwide.
Both at Greenwich High School and nationwide, I would say.
Yeah, though we really can't track, so students submit their own testing, so we really don't have control, like we.
I would
assume it's
say,
around
I would-
50%, but
I would say that's anecdotal,
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
from working with my students, because we aren't tracking who's submitting, but anecdotally, as I'm talking to my kids, it
yeah,
definitely falls in that range.
Pretty much if you're scoring under the average accepted score, you should.
yeah, you want to be looking at the median score from the year prior for that college. So very often students are submitting scores to some schools, but not other schools.
Right.
If you're taking an AP class.
You could
pretty much. No.
No.
Meaning, of course, you'll have to, because if your score is on the.
Well, it's helpful
Depends
if you
on
have a
the
4 or 5, then.
I was gonna say-
That's where you put it on there, but if you're not, you know, you're not gonna score that and you know it, you know.
I
if you don't
usually-
take it,
I usually say to my kids, in terms of like the admissions process, either submit them all or don't submit any. Because then if you're only submitting your 4s and 5s, it leaves like a big giant question mark, like, did they get a 3? Did they get a 2? Did they get a 1? If you just submit none, then they're not a required part of the application. So then there's no question about why they weren't submitted. You just opted not to send them.
And many colleges are not using AP scores.
We're not allowed. We have
I
to
do
go.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have to get.
I think we can take one more
We'll
question.
take one.
So we have our counselors in each of the houses,
Mhm.
but then there's you guys, so how does it work? We talk to our counselor in a house.
Your
and then
counselor
we
is your
talk-
person. So
Yes.
yeah, you want to see me as added support in the process, starting in, after December of,
Okay,
of
so you sort of
December.
layer in at that stage.
yeah, I'm just like extra support. Not everybody sees me, but
Understood.
it, you know, it's open access to anybody that wants to. But I do a lot of workshops, a lot of evening presentations like this.
How do
And
the two different what you do?
well,
So I'm
Danielle has her
actually
own
just, a-
caseload.
I am just that,
Not
I am,
just.
I'm one of the school counselors in Bella House.
Okay.
I just enjoy coming and talking about I worked in admissions before switching to this side of the desk, so I love an opportunity to talk all things college admissions.
Yeah.
And
Thank
so
you.
Michelle is new and she's the new Judy Nadal, basically, which is a different title. now.
Program
Besides
coordinator
not-
for school counseling.
So
Yep.
I think these lovely ladies have to get home. I'm sure everybody else wants to get home. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for supporting the school and the PTA. And I just would like to say, we paid for Kickstart last year. I just want you guys to know in a good way. And like, we're here to support the school and we're here to support the kids. We're here to support you. So just remember that when you come to summer fair and you come and buy tickets for our fundraiser on March 31st, all that money goes back to the school with students.
For the students,
Yeah.
yeah.
You know, for
We're so appreciative.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that to like. say,
No,
"Oh,
no.
Jonathan, the Kickstart with Judy Dell came to us last year and said, can you help? And we said, yes.
Yeah.
And we're happy to because we know that it's helping the kids.
It is
that are now
definitely,
yeah.
applying to college. So it's all big, takes a village. We all help each
Definitely,
other.
yes.
Absolutely.
100%.
So thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The workshops you're talking about.
We should probably be here.